Hi, I'm Linda Mao, and welcome to Art This Week. In this week's episode, we visit the Nasher Sculpture Center and speak with guest curator Brooke Hodge about the exhibition Provocations, the Architecture and Design of Heatherwick Studio. Now for Art This Week.
Hi, I'm here with Brooke Hodge, guest curator of Provocations, Thomas Heatherwick, now open at the Nasher Sculpture Center. Thank you for joining us today, Brooke.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming over to see the show.
So this is a wonderful exhibition, and I just kind of wanted to get started in asking you what your inspiration and motivations were behind displaying Thomas Heatherwick's work and his studio's work.
My interest and I guess my introduction to Thomas and his work, we were trying to figure it out last night. We were talking about it, and I think I first went to visit him at his studio in 2002. So it was 12 years ago, and somebody in London, I think, said to me, "Oh, you should go and visit this guy. He's doing really interesting work." So I went to visit him, and his studio was quite small then, but they were doing really interesting projects, and there were maybe 6 people there. And now the studio is 170 people, and they're doing much bigger scaled projects. And so we really tailored the installation. We worked really closely with Thomas and his studio to design the show for this building, and we thought a lot about when people are approaching the building and there's glass at the ends of each bay, what are they going to see from either end? And so those considerations are really important in exhibition design. And then also being able to see everything pretty much in the round in 3 dimensions, so things aren't pushed against walls, they're really in the center of the space. So you can see all sides of an object, like this bench that we're standing in front of.
Going on to extrusions, we really noticed that in a lot of his work, both in the earlier years that he was creating to now, that he used a lot of different materials and technologies that were sometimes experimental. But how can you possibly talk to us a little bit more about how that may have limited him in what he was creating at the time earlier on? Because there were only so many technologies and materials available to work with.
And I think a lot of what Thomas and his studio do is very advanced in terms of ideas and thinking, and it might be some of the projects might seem kind of far out for clients. Sometimes things sit or simmer on the back burner in the studio, and then somebody comes along and they get it and they want to do it. But I think they're unlike many design or architecture studios, and Thomas is trained as a designer, and the studio is doing lots of large-scale architectural projects now. But the act of physically making things is really essential to the way the studio works and to their process. So they have a workshop in the studio, and they make all of the models there, and they also make some of the machines to test out ideas. Like there is the crumpler machine that's in the show back here that they developed in the studio to crumple the sheets of aluminum to achieve the texture that's on the outside of those buildings. They of course use computer-aided design for the larger scale architectural projects and to make working drawings. But in a way, there are no barriers in Thomas's mind and in the way he works that, why not try this? Why can't we do this? And so for something like the extruded furniture, the idea was, how could you create a piece of furniture in a single extrusion? Because often furniture might have one piece that's extruded or several elements, but this idea was creating the whole piece of furniture from a single extrusion. And in the entry gallery, there's a much longer version of the bench, also created using that same process and the same die. So there's a giant lead die that's really heavy that has the shape, cut into it, and then the metal is extruded through it. And generally people would cut off the part that comes out of the die first because it's the sort of messy part. But it's also the most interesting part and has the most interesting form. And so Thomas and his studio decided to keep that as part of the design, which means that each piece that's extruded is different, because that's never going to be the same on any 2 pieces.
So, Brooke, I wanted you to talk a little bit about Thomas's rolling bridge and just kind of the process that goes on behind creating this very well engineered and also designed piece, which I know is now in London.
So this is an early project in the studio. We didn't really talk about the fact that the show is called Provocations, and that every project in the show is accompanied by a question or a provocation. And that really illustrates the way the studio works, and they question everything, and that sort of leads them to an approach to solve a problem. And so in this case, the question is, can a drawbridge open without breaking? And this is a very small bridge that crosses a little channel that's behind Paddington Station in London, and it was completed in 2004. And the idea was that when drawbridges are raised, they look kind of ugly, or they look like they're broken in the middle, like the two sides just raise up like this. And so Thomas wanted to design a bridge that would look really interesting when it was open, and not just like two sticks sticking up straight in the air. And so he created this structure that has these pieces, different elements. I guess there are 8 of them. And gradually in this model, you can see the stages where it's flat across the channel so people can cross. And then if a boat's going to come through, then the bridge starts raising, and it's you know, he does a lot of work that would be considered engineering or infrastructure work. And that's really interesting too, because usually a lot of practices specialize in one type of work or another. But the studios really embrace these engineering projects because they are also problem-solving challenges for them, and that's really what they like to do. And so the bridge raises gradually, and each of the sections curls onto the next one. So it's like a snail almost sort of curling into its shell, or you mentioned that it's like one of those roly-poly bugs. So by the time the bridge is completely open, it is in this octagonal form, more object-like on the other bank of the channel. And it's become really popular, and it's in a kind of out-of-the-way place behind the station, and it's not a place where tourists really go, but it got quite a bit of press when it was first opened, and now people go there just to see it demonstrated, and that there are certain days and times when you can see it actually being demonstrated even if a boat isn't going through.
You've seen the project here for bridges, also the Teesside power station. We noticed that Thomas really likes to involve himself in a lot of public space type projects, and things that aren't necessarily concentrated for residential or private homes or spaces like that. Can you speak a little bit more into his inspiration and interest in?
I mean, I think anything really that's a challenge, that's unusual, is interesting to him. And so I remember being around the studio at the time when the possibility of the Teesside power station came up, and you know, everybody was saying, wow, that's so exciting to design a power station. When do you get to do that? Because those kinds of projects don't come along that often. And you know, they don't often go to architects or designers' offices. And so I think that it's really the projects, and because of the range of projects that he's done, and the fact that, you know, there are a number of bridges, but there are other product designs, there are different smaller scale architectural projects that, you know, and he's tackled these different types of things: a bus, an Olympic cauldron, a small bridge, a big bridge. So that people, you know, look to the studio now and they think, well, this guy is doing really interesting work with his team, and you know, he's willing to take on these really unusual projects. So I think that's what's appealing about the Teesside project for the studio, and it's an electrical power generating plant, and it's on the banks of the Tees River in the UK, in England. And it's sort of shaped like a pylon almost, or a cone. And the idea is that rather than creating a really ugly, you know, sort of generating plant that looks like it has a lot of stacks and equipment and that kind of thing, is that there would be a park and that the building becomes an attraction, and it has a visitor center, and people there go there and they learn about how power is generated. So it has this educational aspect too, because I think just in the way that the studio looks at every project as a problem to be solved, they're also interested in, you know, inspiring people or helping people learn about other processes that, you know, make the world go around.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really wonderful being able to see his exhibition and speak with you about it as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
We want to thank Brooke for speaking with us. You can find more information on the studio at heatherwick.com. You can find more information on the exhibition at NaxterSculptureCenter.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
I still got your Polaroid.